Hey, welcome to Flower Patterns! My name is Josefine and today I'm going to show you how to make the Idun dress. So this is the Idun pattern and it has 3 views. You can buy the paper version on my website right now if you want to, but I also have the PDF version available. I'm going to use the PDF pattern today and this is how I store it. So I have this folder and I have my printed PDF pattern in here. And if you guys follow me on Instagram, you will have noticed you could vote on which fabric to use. So this is the fabric that won. So most of you thought I should use this fabric. And this is a viscose jersey. I have said previously I prefer a cotton jersey for this pattern. So the one I'm wearing today is Idun VUC, and this is with a regular cotton jersey. So the result with a viscose jersey is it's a bit more slippery and it can be a bit more revealing, and it's not as stiff as a cotton jersey. So that's why I usually prefer a cotton jersey, but this print is really nice, so that's why I bought it. So, and it's a bit more on the thin side than a cotton jersey. But it's gonna be really nice for summer with this fabric. So let's get started. So we're gonna start with cutting out all of the pieces. So I'm doing view A, which is the bodice with a short wide skirt. But you can use this sew along for any of the views. The steps are exactly the same, but the skirt pieces look a bit different. So this is sort of a short skirt that's wide. And the one I'm wearing, for example, is view C and is more narrow, more of a pencil skirt shape. Pay attention to the direction of the fabric. So for this one, I think this is the upside because of the leaves going this way. So the most important thing is you cut all of the pieces in the same direction. So I'm gonna decide this is up. Seam allowance is included in the pieces, 6 millimeters. I'm just measuring to see that the grain line is the same distance from the selvage, both here and here. And that's going to tell me if the piece is placed correctly or not. So that the grain line is correct. So now that we have all our pieces cut out, we're gonna work on the darts first. So we have a back piece here with some waist darts. So what you want to do is you have the starting points of the darts marked. So I just cut like this to see where they start, and then I'm going to use the pattern to mark the dart points. So here we have our darts. Make sure you switch to a stretch needle in your sewing machine before sewing jersey. So now let's move on to the front bodies. So we have the center front piece and then we have two side front pieces. Like this. So this is how they are assembled. And you will see we have a notch on the side front and on the center front, and that's where they're going to meet. So we're going to start with those points. So right sides together. Make sure the notches line up. I'm gonna sew these seams on my serger, but if you don't have a serger or overlocker, you can use your regular machine and use a zigzag stitch. Just make sure you use 6mm seam allowance. So that's basically an overlock stitch, or it's the width of the presser foot if you're using a regular machine. I'm also gonna go ahead and sew all of the skirt pieces together. So just making sure the small part, the waist, is at the top and the larger piece is at the bottom. Sewing them right sides together at all of the sides. So now we're going to put the bodies together. So here's the back and here's the front. So I'm just putting them right sides together, and we're going to overlock or zigzag the shoulder seams. And we can also go ahead and sew the side seams, right sides together. You can sew the skirt on now, or we can work on the bindings. I think it's easier to maneuver if we go ahead and make the binding pieces, because we don't have to have the skirt attached just yet. So we're gonna do that. So the neckband and the binding for the sleeves or the armholes. And we're just gonna overlock them together like this to create the circle. However, this is a jersey fabric with a lot of stretch, and these are more made for a cotton jersey, like a regular one like this. So I'm actually gonna cut off a little bit to make these binding pieces a little bit shorter. It depends really on the fabric, and I haven't tried this exact fabric to see, but my guess is we're gonna need to cut a bit off. So just like that, and I'm gonna put the same amount here, maybe a little bit more on this one, because I don't want the neckline to gape. So this is going to create a more, I think this is going to create the effect I want. So you just have to experiment with your fabric. If you're using like a regular cotton jersey, like a normal cotton jersey, you can use the pattern that comes, the length that comes with the pattern. But if you're using a fabric with a lot of stretch, or it's very slippery and soft, you might want to shorten the binding strips a little bit, just like I did here. We will see how it turns out. So what we're gonna do now is split each seam into 4. So we're gonna quarter the seams. So let's start with the neckline. So obviously we know this is center front and this is center back. So that's like the halfway point. So I'm gonna put the seam as one point at the center back. Right sides together and put a pin. To figure out the next point, I'm just gonna see what's the halfway point, like this. And here it's really important that you pin the correct side of the binding to the correct side here. So I'm going to show you what I mean. Make sure it's not twisted. And right sides together. I will put this at the center front and put the pin. And then you can check all the way around. Yeah, it's not twisted. And what we're going to do now is, the shoulder seam is not the quarter point, so we're going to figure out what is. So I put the pins together, and here I can see that this is the point and not here, because the neckline is different in the front and in the back, so you have to account for that. And there's the point. Now I'm going to do the same on the binding piece, neckband piece. So here we have our point. This is the top, and that's the point that should meet this point. I just put them together and pin in place. And the same for this side. Now that we have our neckline quartered, that's really all the pins you need. And let's move on to the overlocker. We're gonna start at one of the points. I'm just gonna put it in place here. And then what you're gonna do is stretch out so that the pieces lay flat with each other. So this piece is not stretched out, the bodice, but this is really stretched out. And this is gonna keep the neckline from gaping and make it lay flat against your chest. We come to the pin and just remove it and do the same here. So you can see the neckband is really stretched out and the bodice is not. Great! Now let's repeat the process for the armholes as well. It's exactly the same process. You mark the 4 points on the binding and the armhole, and then pin, and then we're gonna sew it together. So now that we have the bindings attached, we're gonna fold once, fold twice,
and place it on the inside like this. So basically we're folding 3 times, like that and like that. So this creates a nice look on the right side, but also on the wrong side. So the overlock or the zigzag, all the seam allowance is encapsulated in this binding. So it's really a clean finish. You can have a look from the inside and also the outside to see that it lays flat and it's not poking out. There are a few ways you can go about top stitching this in place. You can use a zigzag stitch if you want to. I'm going to use a twin needle on my regular sewing machine from the right side. So a twin needle creates sort of like a zigzag stitch on the back side and on the wrong side. So I'm gonna sew from the right side. So I have a twin needle on top here and a zigzag on the back. You can use a cover stitch machine if you want to. A cover stitch also has a chain stitch, which is a stretchy single needle stitch. So it looks like a regular top stitching and there's sort of a chain stretch effect on the back. That's what the kind of seam that would be used in like mass production in the industry. But since most people don't have that kind of machine at home, I'm gonna use top stitching with the twin needle, and that's going to create a really nice effect too. If you have a thicker fabric and you think this is too bulky, you can actually just fold once like this and then fold everything over, but this creates kind of a wide binding, so it's gonna not be as skinny as the other one, but this creates less bulk. But then you have to make sure you sew close to this edge so it doesn't pop out. You can also trim this down if you like. So you have like a smaller fold over like this, but with less bulk. Yeah. But this fabric is quite thin, so I'm just gonna do the fold 3 times method, because I like that result. Make sure it's a stretch twin needle, so it looks like this, and it's made for jersey fabric. So you obviously need 2 threads in the same color to do the top stitching, but if you don't have 2 spools, you can just transfer some to your bobbin. So I have an extra bobbin with the same color. I also have a bobbin in here, and I'm gonna use these as the top stitching threads. We have our bodice ready. It might look a bit wobbly at this point, so what we're gonna do is press this with a lot of steam, and that's gonna solve this. So here we have the bodice, and we have the skirt pieces that we sewed together earlier. And here it's just important to line up the seams of the skirt to the seam of the bodice here. So it's not going to be a seam at the side seam, but at the seams like this. Yeah, and also at the back, the seams line up with the back darts here. Yeah, so we're just gonna pin right sides together. And it doesn't matter which side you put on the front or in the back, because it's just the same all over. So we're gonna find this seam here. This is the back dart, this is the skirt seam. So those two go together. And then we're just gonna overlock this seam. The last step is just to sew the hem. So here it's 1 centimeter seam allowance compared to the 6 millimeter we had in the previous seams. So I'm just gonna fold over 1 centimeter, and I'm gonna use the same top stitching as I did on the neckband and the armholes, because I think that creates a cohesive look. You can use a different, like if you use zigzag here, you can use a twin needle here, but to me I just find it more cohesive and I like the look of the same stitch. So I'm just gonna move over to the other machine and do the tops of the twin needle hem. The dress is done! So this is the result, and I think I take back what I said about the fabric. I think this turned out really nice. It's definitely like a secret pajama. It's very soft, and I mean it's not as structured as what I usually make my Idun dresses out of, but it works really well. And I think the neckband and armholes turned out really well, so I would suggest cutting off a bit of the length if you're using this kind of fabric. And I really love the print and it's very flowy, so I'm really happy with this make. If you have any questions about the Idun dress, how to make any of the steps or any other questions, just leave a comment below. And until next time, happy sewing!